American commentators are calling for the US to invade Australia. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, because we're going to talk about Candice Owens' calls to invade Australia, the US to come to our rescue. Now, before you all get excited, remember, if the US invades, we get the Democrats as well, so we get both sides. Everyone. So who is Candice Owen? Before we go through all of this, let's just bring her up. She is a conservative commentator, everyone. So she was born in 89, so she's relatively young, an American conservative author, show host, political commentator, and activist. Now, we have to remember that when we're looking at any of her content, there's going to be a political bias, particularly in the States, more so than anywhere else. So let's have a look at the media hype that's surrounding this, because a conservative, even if facetiously calling for a US invasion of Australia, the media is all over it. Okay, they're just going to jump all over it. Right-wing pundit Candice Owens suggests US to invade Australia to free an oppressed people. From The Guardian, of course. News.com.au. Invade Australia. US TV hosts a shocking call. From news.com.au. We have a look here from Times Magazine. US conservative want to save Australia from the COVID tyranny. Australians aren't interested. From the Daily Mail. The project host mocks Candice Owens over her plea for America to invade Australia. I wonder what it would do for the housing market, guys. That's the real question, isn't it? We have here, from Lad Bible, of all reputable sources, US commentator wants American troops to invade Australia to spread democracy. Well, I mean, there's a few funny things here, and we're gonna look at what I suspect Candice and a lot of Americans are actually experiencing when they're seeing what Australia is going through. They're experiencing a culture shock. Because, we may look the same, we may have the same Anglican heritage with regards to our nation, but America and Australia are very different on some fundamental things. Candice Owens wants to go to war with Australia. Meanwhile, Australia is wondering, what the F? Yes, well, certainly are. So you can see the media is going over it. The Independent, Candice Owen calls for the US to invade Australia. Daily Mail, conservative US commentator Candice Owen asks, when do we invade Australia to spread democracy? Now, the problem is people, particularly Democrats in the States, will get all their news from the headlines here, and they'll believe all of this. They're going, look at these warmongering right-wingers. So, yeah, let's not fall for that. Let's actually go through first, before we discuss it. Let's have a look at what Candice has to say here, and I'll play this. Hang on, let me just get it sorted.
Politics get in the way of their meaningful relationships.
This is where she mentions that she has family in Australia that don't let politics get in the way of their relationships, which I thought it's healthy and normal. In America, I'm not the only one that sees all the footage of people that are disowning their family members because they're Trump supporters. Some real disgusting stuff. Obviously from people that, frankly, if they're doing that, they've got mental health issues. If they're letting petty shit like that doesn't really matter. Because people will get so obsessed over national and federal and international political things and not really care about what's happening at their local level, which has the biggest impact on them. There you go. And then you got the crowd who live in Twitter and think that's real. So let's keep going.
Well, recently he received a message from one of these family members, and she was expressing how the mental state of everyone around her is in steep decline. She shared with him a message that she had received from a friend of hers, a woman who lives in Queensland, and the message is genuinely shocking.
Okay, so I live in Queensland, everyone. I've gone through remember, this is from a friend of a friend that Candice is now repeating to everyone. So, and Americans are going to be shocked about what they're hearing here, because Australia, we have a different culture to America. We're not the same as Americans. I know some people don't like hearing it, but we're not a libertarian culture here in Australia. Not at all. That's not how our nation was founded. We don't have heroes that we hold up high that fought a tyrannical government to set us free. Not at all. That's not part of our story. That's part of the American story. And that feeds through to their entire identity and being as a people. And that's what gives them their strength. But it's also, in some ways, what's resulting in this culture shock that Americans are experiencing when they're seeing, well, just the sacrifices Australians are willing to make for the greater good. You may not like it, you may not agree with it, but you've got to understand that's what a lot of people think.
Shocked reading this message, and I decided that for this episode, I'm just going to read it to you verbatim. So just to get you guys ready, it's a list of the COVID rules that Australian citizens are being made to follow. And as I read this, I actually want you to close your eyes and to imagine that this was your life.
Well, this actually is my life. I've gone through it for the last 2 years. So let's have a look here. And you've got to remember, all of these things didn't happen all the time everywhere. They did at some parts of Australia, but we'll have to see. And Queensland, remember, this is coming from a person who lived in Queensland, sent to one of Candice's husband's friends. We have had the least impact from COVID bar, WA maybe? They've had a few days. It's had hardly any impact here with regards to the restrictions that we've had. They've had the border closures. You've had some lockdowns. You've got to do masks. You've got to do the bloody QR thing that no one ever does. But compared to Melbourne and Sydney, we've not had it this bad. So it's interesting that this is coming from someone in Queensland.
And to imagine what your mental state would be like if you were being made to abide by these rules. Ready?
Well, that's one thing that I agree with here that we need to really highlight is the fact that we've got exacerbated mental health issues here in Australia and all in the world. Now, that's part of the concern that epidemiologists raised years ago when there was talk about these type of lockdowns and restrictions to mitigate SARS and other similar illnesses. There's a price that you're paying for these interventions. Now, one thing that many people are quite critical of is the fact that we're having this attention drawn to these mental health issues and they may be forgotten as soon as all of this disappears. How are we going to ensure that we don't forget the mental health damage that's been done once everything's open up again? That's a point we need to remember, guys, because it's going to fall off the radar.
First and foremost, there are a limited number of people allowed in your household. And at various times, she writes, we are told we are allowed no visitors.
Yep, that's true. That's happened. We've had population caps here of people visiting our households. Now, that has actually affected us because we're a very large household. We've got myself, my wife, our 5 children, my father-in-law, and my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law who moved in with us when she lost her job, or her job was forlorn, and to save money on rent, coming living with us. So we're a 7-person household, expecting a 6th baby that could drop any minute now. So you can understand, when they've got caps of like 10 people in a house, we can't go anywhere, guys. We can't visit friends. We can't visit family. This has had an impact on the socialization of our children. Now, we already do distance education. We do homeschooling. So a lot of the socialization of our kids isn't at school. It's at play dates and functions and events. That's the thing. People think homeschooled kids are like antisocial. They actually spend more time around a bigger mix of people than I ever imagined. Because, come on, I was normal when I grew up. Not like these homeschooling freaks that we all see. Now we all are. And I think a lot of people are going to appreciate it. But anyway, so that's happened and that's had an impact on us directly. But, I mean, it's just a burden you bear. If anything saves you money.
Funerals have to be kept between 5 and 10 people.
Yep. I mean, they're limiting the size of funerals. That's what happens, everyone.
Must scan a QR code to go everywhere, literally everywhere, including toilets.
I've never scanned one for a toilet. I guess they have them. I mean, here's the thing with the QR codes. You know, I thought if I scanned it, I would get a message on the app telling me if that location was identified as a hotspot. That's not what happens. There's some bloody nincompoop in the QR, the contact tracing department gets all the information, then rings up or contacts or emails people. It is the stupidest bloody method in the world. You think it would be completely automated, or at least with a human just issuing an alert and then that's spreading out to people. But no, it's slow crap and useless. They can't even keep up with it in Sydney. So it's a bit of a joke, really. There's only been one instance when I've been, Actually, no, I've never been done by not scanning in. No one cares in Queensland. My wife has only ever been bugged about it by the libraries. They're the only ones that bug her to make sure. No one else seems to worry. That's the thing. I mean, do we have to? Are we legally required? I mean, I forget all the time. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget.
There are curfews and there are helicopters patrolling the skies to ensure that everyone is abiding by the curfews.
Melbourne and I think Sydney introduced curfews. We didn't have them here in Queensland. At least I'm not aware we had them. The question is of if they actually made a difference. We'll have to see if they mitigated the spread of the illness. Yeah. But she's right, that happened, and they used helicopters. I mean, police use helicopters and drones and everything flying around to monitor and make sure. That's what happens. I'm sure they do the same thing in America, guys. At least they're not the silent black helicopters like from X-Files.
You are not allowed to go past 5 kilometers from your home. Just to put that in perspective, that's about 3 miles. A little over 3 miles from your home, you're not allowed to travel past.
I think we had something similar in Queensland. I'm not sure. I know they've had that in Victoria, really restricting your movements. And that's why everyone went nuts for some stupid reason and bought so much bloody toilet paper. How much is the average Aussie shitting? When all of this is gone, we need to really look at our diets because that's a bad sign, guys.
You're not allowed to sit down at parks, beaches, and public spaces. You're not allowed to drink or eat while standing up anywhere.
That one doesn't make sense. Like you have to go to a sit-down restaurant and sit down rather than standing. I don't understand. I don't get that one. So, I'm walking around with coffee all the time when I get my 7-Eleven coffee. I guess, I thought we meant to do that, aren't we? Oh, well, there you go. I haven't been arrested. But, oh, wait, it's Queensland. It's different.
You must sit down to drink or eat everywhere. No dancing anywhere.
No dancing. I know they've got no singing in church, although no one seems to pay attention to that. Dancing, at nightclubs, they want to stop people dancing on the dance floor. I could live with that rule forever. But that's just my wife didn't marry me for my dancing skills. I know that's shocking. I had a mate tell me, when we were in their 20s, you got to learn to dance. The girls love it. He's right. Good advice.
Only one person per household is allowed to go shopping for essentials. So
that's when they have lockdowns and restrictions. So when we're all locked down and required to stay in our house, only one person is allowed to leave. That's what they've done. Not all the time. Now I can go and get a Big Mac or a 7-Eleven coffee. I can take the kids. I can go to the shopping. It's all fine. We're not all completely locked down all the time. That's only when they have those restrictions. Is it fair? Is it reasonable? It's a pain in the ass. But you can see why they're doing it, to minimize the chance of encounters. That's why.
Essential shopping is allowed. And at times, the Defense Force and police have checked what people are shopping for. Imagine that. What are you buying today?
Yeah, they've done that in front of Kmart, in front of the shops down in Sydney. I saw footage of it. It seems stupid. Who can pick what's essential and what isn't essential? What's worse, that or over in the UK where they got bloody glad wrap over certain things that aren't essential that you can't buy? In America, people just Amazon the shit out of everything. We don't have that here. So that's kind of why it's a little different. It's a way to save money, guys. Think about it. The more money. I'm just worried that we're going to start seeing the coppers check your shops to make sure you don't eat smashed Ave so we can save our house deposits. Because housing is the number one thing here in Australia, really.
That's happening. Dog parks, playgrounds, bike parks, beaches are closed and barricaded. Mask wearing is required when outside and even if you are alone. And at one point in Queensland, it was also required when in your car alone.
I can't believe that. Did that really happen? Who would be such an idiot to wear it? Come on, in the car. Get stuffed. Yeah, sure. But then again, I haven't been very vigilant with that. Perhaps I'm a bad person. That's what it is. They did close the playgrounds. They did close the beaches. They wanted to keep you at home. They wanted to stop the spread, which is stupid when you look at the mental health issues it can have. Yeah, it's kind of sad, really. The restrictions they placed on you, particularly as a parent with kids. This is why I feel sorry for anyone in an apartment, because that's all the outdoor space they have. Could you imagine that, living in an apartment with kids? At least we've got yards.
Or mowing the front lawn.
Did you have to wear a mask mowing the front lawn? Well, lucky I'm slack with the lawn. It needs to go over it.
International borders are closed. No one is allowed to leave the country.
No one is allowed to leave, but they have been bringing international students in to prop up the university sector with a few trial programs. So don't worry, Candice. They're going to bring 2 million immigrants here in the next few years. They'll do everything they can to push to open up the country really quick, really quick.
Small businesses are shut down while big businesses are allowed to operate.
Yeah, she's right there. I'd hate to have a small business. I'd hate to have a cafe. But what are called shares? To the moon.
This next one to me it's insane. It's so crazy. Ready? Citizens are locked out of their home state. Thousands of them are not allowed to return unless they get a vaccine, only after they go through a slow and restrictive exemption request process. Okay, so imagine you live in Tennessee, all right, you happen to be in Connecticut, and they say, you know what? You're not allowed to travel from state to state. You can't go back to your home state of Tennessee unless you get a vaccine.
It's gotten even worse, with some people unable to get across the border to see family members that are dying or sick or take care of their children. It's a complete and utter stuff up. And this is what happens when you've got bureaucrats closing these borders. Down in Tweed, they've got people meeting up at the border, at the barricades, eating food and having coffee over it, kind of as a big FU to the government. So, yeah, there is civil disobedience, and you are having it. You're having the protests as well, and the popularity of those, I think, is not as large as the people in the protests think. You've got a very dispersed group of people protesting. You've got some complete left-wing nutcase communists sitting next to a small business owner that's concerned that they can't run their business and it's collapsing. People ideologically on completely different spectrums coming together for this. So I don't see it as a cohesive movement that's going to make any long-term political change. I think it as a cultural venting of frustrations that we're seeing there. But anyway, back to this.
It's actually unimaginable. Not being able to go home because you have to be vaccinated. Not only that, you have to apply once you get the vaccine to be able to go home. This is what is going on right now in Australia. I genuinely do not know what to say to this, except this. For the last 20 years, the United States has spent trillions of dollars overseas in Afghanistan fighting a war, which we lost, by the way. We were told that the war was necessary anyway. It was necessary, the slaughtering of American sons and daughters on foreign soil, because we were fighting a noble cause to spread democracy.
We could have a few criticisms about some of the issues with the United States form of democracy, but we won't. We'll agree with that. And yeah, the real reasons for all of these invasions, but still.
Tyrannical land to free an oppressed people. So I'm going to ask those same lecturing politicians and media members a question now. When do we deploy troops to Australia?
See, I've only seen clips of this. This is the first time I'm watching her whole thing in one take. And notice how they've cut out this bit. If you go on Twitter, you go see other people. It's not framed as a question to certain politicians and groups to make a political purpose. It's just framed as her agitating for invasion, which I think is comical. And it just shows you the media hype, everyone.
When do we invade Australia and free an oppressed people who are suffering under...
You can take Victoria. Okay, we'll just slice off Victoria, and you can take it and just attach it to California up there, and she'll be right. You can have it. Don't even pay us. Just take it. It's all good. Dan will love it there. They'll have to acclimatize a bit. It'll be a bit hotter for them, but they'll get used to it. Just take Victoria. Take it. You can have it for free. Free. Even take Canberra too. We'll chuck in Canberra, both of them for free.
Totalitarian regime. When do we spend trillions of dollars to spread democracy in Australia?
Shit, you know if they spent trillions of dollars spreading democracy here in Australia, you know what it'll do, guys. You know what it'll just pump up housing to the moon. Can you see the headlines? Australia invaded. Sydney houses, $5 million. Oh, yeah, I can see it now. You know, I can see it now. Oh, boy. And it'll probably be just when the housing market is slightly down. You're down 10%, so you get the call from ScoMo to the Yanks. Invade. Now, come over. We need our housing propped up. Quick, quick, quick. And they'll only land the troops in the shitty suburbs. That's what it'll be. It won't be the good suburbs will be spared. It'll be the shitty suburbs, guys.
Yeah. Australia currently, make no mistake, is a tyrannical police state. Its citizens are quite literally being imprisoned against their will. So when do we deploy?
Here's the thing. You've got to realize. Australia is an authoritarian country, even before all of this. Okay? We're not a democracy in the same state, or a republic like America is. We don't have the same level of, we have a higher tolerance for the state under the guise of protecting our individual liberties, but we're expected to make sacrifices to the state for the greater good. And we'll have a look at this in a moment. Because if you look at Australia with a utilitarian mindset and think about the influence that utilitarianism had on the transition of Australia from colony to nation, it all starts to become clear. Even our conservative politicians are not very right-leaning compared to American. You'll be hard-pressed to find any Australian that will be critical of the paying a few percent of their income every year for Medicare to provide healthcare for all. Now, in America, you can have the Joe Rogan experience. If you have money and influence, you can get a much better, more unique healthcare system. Here in Australia, you can get private health cover, which gives you a nicer room and probably faster treatment. But you can't really go outside the bounds to the same extent that Americans can. But we don't have the extremes of provisions of service here as they do in America. Everyone's paying their Medicare. Everyone gets their access to the service. It may be slower than you'd hope. You may not have the same choices that you expect, but you'll get it. And in some regards, it's some of the best in the world. Our EDs are really cutting edge, our emergency departments. The way of mitigating illness in hospitals through having individual rooms for patients. It's fantastic. So, there's a lot to learn from. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of waste and a lot of bureaucrats sitting on their ass and so many people in these meetings. But there's also some things to learn from it too.
Of course, I asked that in jest because we all know the real answer. What's happening in Australia?
So there you go. It was a joke. That was cut out of everything else, wasn't it?
Australia, under the guise of a virus, which, by the way, as of August 7, 2021, experts estimate the overall recovery rate is between 97% and 99.75%. What's actually happening under the guise of this virus is federal overreach, tyranny, totalitarianism.
Well, it's actually state level. It's not federal level. It's the states that are implementing this. So you've got different states implementing different rules, different restrictions. It's coming down from the premiers. Okay, so depending on the state you're in will depend on the amount of freedom that you have. It'll be interesting to see how people vote at the next election, everyone.
The kind that gives birth to evil dictatorships and human atrocities.
Now, she's being hyperbolic here. The thing is, what we're seeing here is, I can see how she can make the analogy. I can see how we can even say we're down the steps to genocide, but we're nowhere near as far along as people think. And you're not going to see a populist leader rise up that will become a totalitarian leader in Australia here. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be Gladys, who was kicked out in New South Wales? Is it going to be Dan Andrews, who everyone loves? Oh, wait, no, there's corruption probes with him too. Is it going to be ScoMo? He may not even win the next election. Or what about Albany Anthonese? Hey, our very own Biden, does he have enough popular support? So no, she's being hyperbolic here, and this is the thing. This is the culture shock that we're seeing from an American perspective, looking into Australia. It's a culture shock here. It's like when you go to a different country, you will often experience culture shock. I'd a friend from Japan. He came over here and he lived in Australia for years. He went back home to work. He suffered culture shock because he'd been exposed to Australian culture for too long.
We are watching a replay of the early ambitions of Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez.
Oh, come on. Now, she's playing to her audience. She is playing to her audience here, which she has to do. You've got to get the views, get the eyeballs. But no, we're not seeing that here in Australia. I'm sorry to all the hardcore fascists or the hardcore communists. You're not going to get that in Australia anytime soon. Your dream isn't going to happen, you know.
That is what is hiding beneath the guise of this fictitious, perpetual need to slow the spread.
The problem is Australia has this ingrained culture of health and safety. Health and safety. It comes from Benthamism that's just infected our entire nation in some regards. It's just it's intuitively assumed. It just goes through all your education system, healthcare system, universities, government policy. So yeah, that's kind of why.
We all know some more truths. That what's happening in Australia was meant to happen here in America. That this current totalitarian administration is fighting tooth and nail to trample state rights and federalize America. And if it were not for Republican governors standing in the way, we would be similarly stripped right now of our most basic of individual freedoms.
She's probably right. She's probably right. Biden would push for that. The American system is very different to Australia. Your politics is very different to Australia. This is where Democrats fail, when they think they can hold Australia up as a model and import it over to America. It's not going to work. The culture is too different. It's, all the ones who are holding up gun laws here in Australia and want to import it to America, it's impossible. Your culture is not the same. It's kind of like taking a knife from a Sikh wielding. I would say guns in America to some people is a religious phenomenon. It's like it's fundamental to their identity. Not so much here in Australia. You have all these people writing on the comments going, "Oh, look at when Australia gave up their guns," or they never gave up their guns. What are you going to do? A cops comes and gives you a $50 ticket for not wearing a mask. You're going to pull a gun out at him? What are you, bloody nuts? No, you're not going to do that stuff. If you do that, then you should be in a mental hospital or arrested because you're insane. Okay, that's the reality of the situation. That's how you'd see it from an Australian perspective. You're a bloody nutter. Okay, that's what it is. You're not normal. If that's what you do over such a little burden, then you probably need to see a psychiatrist. So yeah, that's the thing, guys. I doubt it's not compatible, and that's where the Democrats really fall over, and they don't get it. They do not get it.
Can anybody, by the way, explain to me in simple sentences why the Australian government is any better or any nobler than the Taliban?
Oh boy! Oh wow! Yeah, well, in many ways it is. In a simple sentence, why is it? Well, we still have universal suffrage. We still have the ability to work when we're free to work. You're not just completely discriminating against... Oh, they are in some regards discriminating against sex and race, but not as rampant as the Taliban. We've still got a few steps to go. We'll be okay. We'll get there. Both
groups believe that they have a right to oppress and a right to imprison people for their own good.
It's what America does too. You've got jails. You've got a prison system. Come on, Candice. Come on. You're playing to your audience here.
Are Western governments any better anymore? I can honestly say that never did I ever think that I would live to see a world war. But we're here. We are in the midst of an ideological and psychological global war. And it is a war that is being waged by governments all over the world, from here all the way to Australia, against the very citizens that they govern. So to that end, I say, welcome to World War III. Welcome to Candace.
Okay, well, Interesting. Insight into the psyche of conservative American hyperbole, really. She's playing to her audience. Okay, I know Kanye, hasn't he fallen out with her? I think she kind of took advantage of him, so we'll leave that there. But there's a few things I want to talk about first. Now, about how, Australia is a little different. And I want to introduce you to a certain philosopher, everyone. And the reason I want to bring this philosopher to your attention, because, his philosophy, I would argue, has had a significant impact on Australia, on the formation of Australia as a country. And I'll bring this up here. So it's Jeremy Bentham. So he was an English philosopher, a jurist, and social reformer, regarded as the founder of modern utilitarianism. And he was actually considered a reactionary or revolutionary in his time. Now, the reason why I'm bringing him up is because a lot of his teaching and philosophy influenced a significant amount of Australia back in, the formation of Australia as a nation. And we need to look at what Benthamism is, or what he defines it as, and which is utilitarianism. So Bentham defined as the fundamental axiom. An axiom is the fundamental argument. Do I have a definition of axiom here? I should probably add it to my list. The fundamental argument or position. Hang on, I'll look at that up because this is a term you need to understand the definition of. So, an axiom is an unprovable rule or first principle accepted as true because it is self-evident or particularly useful. So, this is accepted as truth from his position, his philosophy. So, the fundamental axiom of his philosophy, the principle that it is the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. Okay? So, think about this from an experience here in Australia. We are all burdened forcefully with a Medicare levy that we have to pay. Sure, you can get out of it if you get private health cover, but you're still paying money for one thing or another. So we're all forced to pay this levy. And then this ensures that the greatest number of people, every citizen, has the right to access to healthcare, to go to a hospital. Some people will need it more than others, but we're all forced by the state to bear that burden. So you get the greatest amount of happiness for everyone in with regards to healthcare, and the idea is that we experience that burden of 3% or 2%. I don't even know. I've got taxes are due soon. I've got to do my taxes, so I'm avoiding it. But that's a burden that we have to bear. Now, you'll be hard-pressed to find Australians that disagree with that. You'll find more and more Australians would argue that, oh yeah, mate, she's just put up with that and kept moving on. You've got a political apathy here in Australia because everything just seems to keep going. Most people don't worry about it. In many ways, this was the first moment, all of these lockdowns and restrictions and interventions into our daily lives. It was the first experience for some people of just how much we've handed over to our bureaucrats and our politicians. Australians don't realize how little liberty we actually have and how much we've given over to the state. So it's not that we're quite a socialist country. We're a country where we're willing to accept some burdens on our back for the greater good. And I know some people may not like hearing that, but if you have that, but you look at Australia, look at the decisions, look at our politicians on both sides of the spectrum with that mindset, it all starts to become a little clearer, everyone. Now, thank you for watching. I want you to watch another video here. Now, if you enjoyed this one, this is looking at why 70% of Australian workers support mandatory vaccination or want their employers to facilitate it. Look at it with a Benthian or utilitarian perspective, and then think perhaps you'll appreciate why so many people support it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.